Have you ever wondered what are the best strength routines to do as a swimmer? My name is Katrina Radke, and I have the pleasure of introducing you today to Ross Gerry. He is an Olympic coach, former Stanford coach, and strength and conditioning specialist who actually developed the strength and conditioning program at Stanford when they won 6 NCAA titles and produced many world champions, Olympic champions, world record holders, and NCAA champions. You obviously created a dynasty during your time at Stanford with Richard Quick, and you guys obviously developed a very good strength program. What did you do during your time then, and what do you do with clients now throughout the world?
Sure, that's a great question. There's so many things involved in creating an effective training program on the Dryland program for swimming. And our sport is unique. We're in the water, we're not on land. And most of the strength training programs that we get from other coaches really come from football, or they come from weightlifting, or they come from those other kinds of activities that really have very little to do with us. In swimming, we have to create our vessel and our oars and our paddles. We have to create strength and elongated postures. It's just a very different animal. We have to create our own anchors in the water. There's nothing to really push off except for the start and the turns. So just with those ideas in mind, you can already see that the program has to be vastly different from what most people are doing.
So can you give us some examples of, if you were obviously a developmental athlete who's young versus an elite athlete, it's very different. Can you share on that?
Yeah, I think we have to have an idea about the athlete's whole career in mind, with the idea that we're going to follow them from whenever we start with them at age 8 or whatever it is, all the way through their collegiate career. And if we have that in mind, number one goal is to build an athletic framework that will go the distance and achieve the goals that we want to have. Number two, let's prevent injuries. Let's find a way of balancing the muscles and balancing the body and creating the posture and everything that we need to do to have the success that we ultimately want to have.
So what would be a simple routine that you might be able to share on here? I know you've also created some DVDs with a great whole season's worth of Dryland.
Right.
What are some things you can share with viewers today?
Well, I think some of the things are that we can certainly do most of these things with very, very little equipment. And so that these are sort of supplemental exercises that any athlete can do on their own at home and should do. And that involves, we have to increase our range of motion. And when we talked about the elongated postures, well, we have to get into those postures in order to be able to sustain the world-class technique that you need to have in order to go fast. So we've got to create the posture. We've got to set the tone for the body to have structural integrity from the tip of the fingers all the way through the toes, so there's no dead spots in the body, so that when we hold the water, that our vessel moves nicely through the water. There's not any power leaks in there. So we've got to create that kind of endurance of postural muscles first and foremost, and then all of the stabilizer muscles before we start worrying about strength of the big prime mover muscles that we're so familiar with.
And so we often see that with bodybuilders and people who really want to look big, that actually can cause more injuries. Is that true?
Well, there's an injury problem there too, because if we create too much muscle mass before we develop the tendons and the bone structure to support it, we're inviting injury. But the other thing is, look at the bodybuilders, look at the weightlifters. They're basically squares. Squares do not move quickly through the water. We don't want to do the same exercises that produced those bodies for our sport.
Great.